Hello, welcome again to my channel, KC Sledge Storyteller. I'm Kerry Chug, and I'm here to talk about the wonderful world of storytelling and to open up discussion about how we can tell the best stories we possibly can. Last week I went over character, next comes conflict. By conflict, we're talking about what opposition the protagonist is up against. Often he or she overcomes that opposition, but sometimes the hero will experience failure and will grow from that. And other times the solution lies in his or her finding resolution and overcoming something completely different from what was initially aimed at. Remember, needs versus wants last week. And the literary community has listed 6 categories of conflict. And it should be noted that these conflicts often overlap, and we'll mention that a few times here and there. But first is man versus self. And that's all about ethics and or morals. The protagonist here is faced with having to make tough decisions, usually when the easy way betrays his or her scruples. And in Empire Strikes Back, Luke Skywalker is faced with the dilemma. This is one example of he risks Han and Leia getting killed if he keeps up with the training, and his decision to interrupt that training to rescue them proves costly. In Rocky 3, Rocky struggles to confront his fear of getting walloped again in the boxing ring by Clubber Lang to the brink of his giving up, but his wife influences him to confront his fears and make sure he does it for the right reason. Much of Sledge's Man vs. Self initially starts with convincing himself that he is in fact capable of bringing down crime in the streets and taking the next step toward heavy organized crime. Arguably, since this involves so much emotion, it's the most challenging to get right and the most compelling when a writer does get it right. Then we have man versus man. Often it's good guy versus bad guy, but sometimes the moral line can be blurred. Take the movie Captain America Civil War. It became, by Marvel's invitation, a debate to be had among the moviegoers. And some agreed with Steve Rogers, some agreed with Tony Stark, and they made both the ideological and physical battles work to make the story compelling. But even when antagonists are clearly depicted, you want to put as much strength into their argument as you can. Take the Joker in The Dark Knight. Here he's strictly black hat, challenging the very notion of morality itself. You couldn't agree with him, but you find yourself having to think for a moment about what your counter-argument would be to his. I was going to go further into depth on that, but I am thinking of saving that for videos dedicated to discussing heroes and villains. Now, man versus society. This is arguably the central conflict in the initial stories I've been writing about Sledge. As often is the case with crime fighters getting involved in their community that way, that becomes a matter of trust, that someone like that can be trusted to make the right decisions. By that too is a focus for another video. Sometimes it's dealing with a part of society that doesn't understand certain people's circumstances, what they need. People appealing to the government to enact certain laws, and it can be like a local building project that the protagonist opposes, but much of the community favors. Basically, can't we all get along? Next, man versus nature. This one has a huge spectrum. Think about the movies involving earthquakes, volcanoes, and tornadoes. Then you have all the kinds of wild animals, runaway lions, bears, sharks, rhinos, elephants. Then you have the very extreme versions of that on the Sci-Fi Channel. I have a soft spot for Anaconda versus Lake Classic. And don't forget about epidemics and asteroids, given how so many of these stories lend themselves to self-aware schlock and parody. It's quite the challenge to come up with a truly engaging story. But for me, it's one of those things I let swim in my head, believing that someday the light bulb will turn on in there for a fun, if not substantive story. Next is man versus machine, or technology. It's worth mentioning that sometimes this combines with man versus nature. Jurassic Park, for example. but it could be artificial intelligence that turns on the human race, nuclear power. It has often become the basis for a lot of stories in that realm. Then there's the whole Big Brother thing, but the often substantive deal here is the issue of technology that is meant to benefit humanity and becomes a major threat. Still, I believe that the kind of story where the bad guy is in his super tank against the good guy's inferior battle vehicle, that has its place. Maybe because one Sledge script I wrote falls under that premise. Then finally, Man vs. Fate / Supernatural. This is a real standout in ancient mythologies. It could be war against angry, vengeful gods or against a devil figure. It can be about destiny and the struggle to realize or a rebellion against it. So it often finds itself overlapping with Man vs. Self. The whole race to find the big-time powerful magic relic also applies here, Indiana Jones stuff. I've been pondering writing this kind of story. I've always just been worried over the task of making sure the powers on the opposing side stay consistent. I may touch, this is another thing I may touch upon that on that subject in another video. But that's all 6 categories of conflict and my insights into them. If you like this video, please click like. If you like this channel, please click subscribe. I hope this can get some discussion going. Agree, disagree, something I didn't mention, please comment below. Have a great day.